Hello, I'm Dr. Adam, a urologist with over 25 years of experience helping men live healthier, stronger, and more confident lives, especially after 60. Every week, I share real advice, surprising science, and personal stories from my patients, because it's time we talk openly about men's health without fear or shame. What I'm about to share may surprise you, but it could change the way you take care of your body, your mind, and your manhood. Let's get started. You wake up one morning and something feels different. It's not loud or urgent. No sudden loss. No dramatic shift. Just a quiet thinning of sensation. The touch that used to make you feel alive now feels distant, almost mechanical. The warmth you once knew has cooled into a muted ache. There's a weight behind your eyes, like the gravity of decades settling in. You notice your body responding slower, less certain. A hardness that won't hold. A desire that doesn't rise to meet you. You wonder if you've become a stranger to yourself. Sex was never just about the act. It was about connection. About feeling known, seen, alive. Yet now, it seems you're drifting away from those you love, from your own body, and from the small moments when pleasure and meaning meet. Masturbation, once a gampole, act of release, has become a refuge. Sometimes it's the last thing you do before sleep, a ritual to quiet the loneliness. Other times, it's a way to distract yourself from the creeping sense of emptiness. But no matter how often you do it, the numbness lingers. You don't speak about it. Shame cloaks your silence. You tell yourself this is just part of aging, that your body is betraying you. But somewhere beneath the surface, you suspect there's more. A subtle erosion taking place, one that's not just physical, but emotional. The truth is that after 60, masturbation is no longer just about the physical act. It becomes a conversation between body and mind, between desire and fear, between presence and disconnection. And mistakes made in this conversation can deepen the numbness, trapping you in cycles of isolation. I want to tell you a story about a man named Robert, 62 years old, once vibrant, now withdrawn. His marriage ended years ago. His children are distant. He finds himself alone most nights, turning to his hands for comfort. But the relief is fleeting. The emptiness remains. Robert doesn't realize that some of his habits, the way he reaches for quick release without connection, have worn down the pathways that lead to genuine feeling. His body remembers, but his heart has grown distant. This numbness isn't a sudden storm. It's a slow, steady fog. It settles in the spaces where pleasure used to live. It creeps into your thoughts, your movements, your very sense of self. One mistake Robert made was confusing routine with presence. He masturbated out of habit, not desire. The act became automatic, something to check off, like brushing teeth, without arousal, without engagement. The body and mind lose their dialogue. The nervous system shuts down, and the prostate, intimately tied to emotional health, begins to suffer. Another mistake was using visual stimuli as a crutch. Robert spent hours scrolling through images, chasing fleeting arousal. But images can't replace the subtle energy of true desire. The disconnect between what he saw and what he felt created a barrier, a silent withdrawal from his own sensations. Tension was another enemy. Years of holding back emotion had hardened his pelvic floor muscles. When he masturbated, he clenched without knowing. His body was braced, guarding wounds invisible to the eye. This chronic tension cut off circulation, dulled nerves, and reinforced the numbness. And then there was guilt, quiet but pervasive. guilt for wanting, guilt for needing, guilt for being alone, guilt that attached itself to pleasure and turned it into shame. Robert believed that feeling desire was selfish or embarrassing. So he hid it, even from himself. These mistakes weren't conscious choices. They were survival mechanisms shaped by years of neglect, silence, and unspoken pain. But they came at a cost. The body stores stories. Every clenched muscle, every rushed movement, every suppressed emotion becomes part of the fabric of your being. And when you reach 60 and beyond, these stories manifest as numbness. This numbness isn't just physical. It's an emotional blockade. It muffles joy, dulls connection, and isolates you from your own experience. Yet beneath the numbness, there is still life, still the possibility of rediscovery. You may feel lost now, but your body is waiting. Your heart is waiting to feel again, to connect again, to be seen again. The path forward begins with recognition, with honesty, with the courage to see the ways you've disconnected. Robert's story isn't unique. It's the quiet story of many men who've reached a crossroads. The question isn't whether numbness will take hold. It's whether you will allow it to define you. The mistakes that led to this moment can be unlearned. The numbness can be thawed. But first, you must look clearly at what's been happening in the shadows. Because the journey you're on is not just about sex. It's about reclaiming your presence in the world, about breaking through silence, about finding yourself again, beneath the layers of fear and regret. If you listen closely, you can hear the subtle pulse of life beneath the numbness. It's quiet, but persistent, waiting for your attention. Your body remembers how to feel. Your heart remembers how to hope. And the first step is simply this to begin. The numbness settles like a fog, insidious and relentless. It is not always visible. It doesn't shout or demand. Instead, it erodes the edges of feeling, dulls the senses, and quiets the heart until the man himself begins to question what is left inside. Robert knew the numbness was there. He felt it creeping in between moments of solitude, a void where connection used to live. And yet, he said nothing. Shame made speech impossible. The shame of loss of desire, loss of power, loss of identity pressed down heavy on his chest, quieting any attempt at confession. He carried a silence heavier than words, a silence that followed him through empty rooms and lonely nights. The shame wasn't loud. It was a whisper that grew louder in his mind. You should be different, it said. You should want more. You should be able to feel more. And when he couldn't, the silence turned inward into blame. The breakdown was gradual but devastating. His masturbation habit, once a simple release, became a way to avoid feeling altogether. The act was rushed, mechanical, disconnected. The hands moved without invitation from the heart or mind. The sensations were muted, familiar, but hollow. The climax was empty, leaving a lingering sense of loss instead of relief. This was the third mistake Robert made using masturbation as a shield rather than a bridge. Instead of opening himself to sensation and emotion, he used the act to anesthetize, to escape, to push away the creeping loneliness. The consequences went deeper than the physical. The prostate, a delicate and sensitive organ, was caught in the crossfire. Without true arousal, without the slow buildup of desire, the gland became inflamed and congested. The flow of fluids slowed. Discomfort appeared. Nights became interrupted by urgency and ache. But Robert ignored the signals, because admitting the pain meant admitting something worse, the loss of control. And control, After 60, becomes an obsession for many men. Control over the body, over desire, over the fading sense of self. Robert clung to rituals that gave him a semblance of mastery, even when those rituals were eroding him. The tension in his body was another prison. Years of holding back grief, frustration, anger, and loneliness had tightened muscles he didn't know he was clenching. The pelvic floor, the abdomen, the jaw all locked into patterns of stress and resistance. Each masturbation session reinforced this tension, making release more difficult, more distant. When the body tightens, the mind follows. The cycle of tension and numbness fed itself, deepening the isolation. Robert's shame created walls between him and the world, but also between him and himself. He believed he was the only one suffering, that no one could understand the confusion and sorrow hidden behind his quiet exterior. But the shame is a shared burden, carried by countless men who fear vulnerability more than loneliness. The turning point came unexpectedly. A medical exam. A candid conversation with a doctor who asked more than the routine questions. The doctor spoke plainly about pelvic health, emotional well-being, and the interconnectedness of body and mind. For the first time, Robert heard words that named his experience without judgment. He realized that his habits were not just physical patterns but reflections of his inner state. The disconnection, the numbness, the shame, they were all part of a system that had grown unhealthy. It was the moment when avoidance became impossible, when he could no longer pretend that things were just part of getting older. The turning point was painful because it demanded honesty. The truth was that he had been using masturbation to bury emotions that needed tending, to mask fears that needed facing, to avoid loneliness that needed confronting. But honesty also brought possibility. Robert began to see that change required more than willpower. It required compassion for his body, for his mind, for the years of neglect that had led him here. The process of reclaiming sensation meant facing discomfort, not just physical discomfort, but emotional rawness. The loss of old beliefs about masculinity, strength, and desire. He had to relearn how to be present with himself, how to invite feeling without fear, how to allow vulnerability to coexist with his identity. This was not weakness, it was courage, and it was the first real step toward healing. Robert's story is not unique. It is the story of many men navigating the difficult terrain of aging, sexuality, and emotion. The mistakes made along the way are common habitual masturbation without presence, avoidance of intimacy, chronic tension, shame, isolation. But the turning point, the willingness to face these mistakes, is where transformation begins. In the next section, we will explore how rebuilding is possible, how acceptance can open doors to a new kind of sexual and emotional life, how men can find rebirth not by returning to the past, but by embracing the fullness of who they are now. For now, hold this moment, the moment when silence is broken, when shame is named, when hope flickers, however faintly, in the darkness, because that flicker is the beginning of light. The path forward is not a leap. It is a series of small steps, taken with intention and gentleness. Robert did not erase years of numbness in a single moment. Instead, he began to listen, to feel, to be present. Rebuilding after disconnection means learning new rhythms. It means slowing down long enough to notice the subtle signals of your body, how tension feels, where pleasure begins, when desire awakens. For Robert, this started with breath, the simplest act, yet often the most neglected. He learned to breathe deeply into the belly and pelvis, releasing the tightness he hadn't realized he carried. With each breath, he unwound layers of stress held beneath the surface. Touch, too, changed. The hurried, mechanical motions gave way to curiosity. His hands explored with less urgency and more care. He paid attention to sensations without rushing toward release. Sometimes, there was no climax. Sometimes, the act was slow, deliberate, more about connection than outcome. This was unfamiliar territory. Without goals or expectations, he began to experience a new kind of pleasure, a pleasure grounded in presence. His body responded. The prostate, once inflamed and congested, softened. The aches lessened. Nighttime discomfort faded. But more importantly, his emotional landscape shifted. Where once there had been numbness, there was now space. Space for feeling. Space for grief, for longing, for hope. He discovered that emotional numbness and physical numbness were entwined. Healing one opened the door to healing the other. Acceptance played a crucial role. Robert stopped fighting his age, his body's changes, or the way desire ebbed and flowed. Instead, he began to honor where he was. Acceptance did not mean resignation. It meant recognizing reality and choosing to engage with it honestly. This shift changed everything. Shame lost its grip. The quiet voice of self-judgment softened. He began to speak more openly with friends, with doctors, with himself. Sexual rebirth, Robert realized, was not a return to youth. It was a transformation, a deeper, more textured experience of intimacy and pleasure. He redefined what it meant to be a sexual man after 60. Not someone chasing past performance or validation, but someone embracing vulnerability, presence, and connection. The act of masturbation became part of this rebirth, no longer a hurried escape or a silent burden, but a practice of self-care and awareness. Sometimes it was alone. Sometimes it was part of sharing intimacy with a partner. Always it was a way to stay connected to his body and emotions. Along the way, Robert faced setbacks. Old habits resurfaced. Doubts crept in. But with patience, he treated these moments as part of the process, not failure, but growth. He found strength in community, seeking out others navigating similar challenges. He learned that isolation feeds numbness, but connection nourishes vitality. Healing became holistic. It involved movement, mindfulness, conversation, and curiosity. His relationship with his body evolved from adversary to ally. And with healing came respect. Respect for the complexity of aging, for the body's wisdom, and for the courage required to keep feeling even when it's hard. This journey is not linear. There will be days of doubt and days of clarity, moments of loneliness and moments of profound connection. But each step forward brings you closer to presence. If you've struggled with numbness, if you've felt the slow erosion of pleasure and emotion, know that it's possible to reclaim what feels lost. Not by chasing youth or ignoring change, but by meeting yourself with honesty and compassion. You can learn to listen to your body again, to invite feeling, to hold vulnerability, to experience desire in new ways. Because after 60, masturbation is not just an act of release. It is a dialogue, a conversation with your body, your mind, and your heart. When approached with awareness, it can be a source of healing, connection, and self-respect. The mistakes of the past do not have to define your future. There is life beneath the numbness. There is feeling waiting to return. The question is whether you will take that first step. Robert took his. You can too. You are not alone in this. You are neither broken nor diminished. You are evolving, even if the path is uncertain. If what you have heard resonates, if the quiet truths here reflect your own experience, subscribe. This channel offers more than information. It offers a space to confront the complexities of aging without pretense or judgment. Here, men explore the questions that few speak aloud. Join us. Share your story when you're ready. Step into the conversation with others who refuse to surrender their presence or their dignity. This is a place to reclaim your voice and your body, on your terms.